Welcome, traveler of time. Tonight, as the world around you quiets, allow yourself to drift gently into the rhythms of a long-forgotten past. We're journeying far from the noise of the modern world into sacred halls, candlelit chambers, and finely carved stone temples that echo with stories too often whispered rather than told. This is a tale not of warriors or kings, but of women who lived at the edge of power and performance, of courtesans and dancers, of rituals and expectations, of beauty, devotion, and the delicate line between reverence and restraint. Let the gentle murmur of history soothe your thoughts as we explore the secret lives of courtesans in ancient India world, suspended between sacred duty and sensual grace, between temple incense and palace perfume. Begin, not in luxury or freedom, but at the very beginning. Imagine yourself waking to the soft rustle of cotton saris, the muted clink of ankle bells, and the scent of turmeric and lamp smoke rising in the early dawn air. You are not royalty. You are not a servant. You are something in between a devadasi. From the outside, your life may seem serene, even privileged. You live near the temple within its outer walls or a compound nearby. Your duties revolve around the gods, not manual labor. But what few outsiders understand is how little control you truly have. You did not choose this path. Most devadasis were dedicated to the temple as young girls, sometimes as early as 5 or 6 years old. Often it was a family decision driven by economic need, tradition, or the desire to gain favor with the divine. A ritual would be performed, garlands offered, your hair touched with holy ash, and just like that, your path was set. Your body would not belong to a husband, it would belong to the god. Your daily life followed strict rhythms. Before the sun fully rose, you bathed in cold water drawn from the temple tank. You applied sandalwood paste to your arms, cold to your eyes, and colored your lips with crushed flowers, not for vanity, for ritual. Each movement of your body, each expression on your face was studied and practiced endlessly. You were not merely a dancer, you were expected to embody devotion. Every step, every glance in the traditional Bharatanatyam form told a sacred story. And so you rehearsed, again and again. Physical demands were relentless. Long hours spent squatting, balancing, holding postures that strained your thighs and arched your spine. Your feet hardened from stamping patterns into stone floors. Your eyes learned to flutter, to widen, to emote without speech. There were no sick days. No freedom to be bored or tired. And yet outside the temple, the world did not always view you as sacred. The line between spiritual devotion and sensuality was thin, sometimes invisible. While within the temple, you were honored. Outside it, you could be treated with suspicion. Gossip often followed devadasis. Some saw you as divine vessels. Others saw only scandal. You were neither wife nor widow. You lived outside the caste structure, respected by some, whispered about by many. You did not marry, and your children, if you had them, were born without fathers named. Your art was admired, but your autonomy was limited. Patrons, wealthy men from court or village elites, might visit the temple and become infatuated with your beauty or your dance. They might offer gifts or favors. Some relationships were affectionate, some were controlling, and many devadasis had no real choice in the matter. Some became companions to kings. Others became the property of landlords. There was safety and proximity to power, but rarely true security. Yet within this complicated life, there were moments of resilience, of joy, of sisterhood. Devadasis were not merely dancers. They were also custodians of music, poetry, language, and storytelling. They preserved and performed songs that would have otherwise been lost. Some became renowned musicians. Some wrote poetry under pen names. Few even challenged kings and priests with wit and wisdom. Still, each night you returned to your chamber ankles, sore eyes, tired. The incense fading, and you wondered, would your daughter follow your path? Would she too one day feel the press of cold stone against her feet, and wonder where choice ends and tradition begins? But that is the rhythm of their lives, the constant tension between duty and desire, between devotion and the world's gaze. And now, as the temple lamps flicker low in your mind's eye, we'll leave the courtyard of the devadasis. Follow one woman who walked that line more boldly than most. Courtesans so celebrated, so powerful, that kings sought her favor, yet she turned her back on it all. She was Amrapali, and her story is next. Let the rhythms of the temple fade. Let the incense drift behind you. Now imagine yourself beneath a flowering mango tree. The air is sweet with blossoms. The leaves whisper softly above, and the ground is warm beneath your bare feet. You are no longer in the temple's shadow. You are in Vaishali. It's one of the world's oldest known cities. And this is where she lived, Amrapali. Her name still lingers in poems and chronicles. It's whispered in Buddhist texts, praised in ancient verses, remembered not only for her beauty, but for the choices she made. She was born, it is said, beneath that very mango tree. Some stories say she was found there abandoned as an infant, cradled in the roots, the breeze singing lullabies through the branches. She was adopted by a gardener, or in other tales, raised within the city by nobles. But no matter the version, one detail always remains: the mango grove. Amrapali means the sprout of the mango tree. She grew into a woman of striking grace, poised, intelligent, and expressive. In time, she was named the Nagar Vadhuth, official courtesan of the city of Vaishali. Now, this title may seem strange today, but in many ancient Indian republics, the Nagarvade who was not merely a courtesan. She was often the most cultured woman of her generation, trained in dance, music, poetry, and politics. She did not belong to one man. She was a figure of prestige for the entire city. Imagine it. As Amrapali walked through the marble courtyards of Vaishali, silk whispering at her ankles, crowds parted. Princes sought her company. Poets composed verses in her honor. Rival kings crossed borders hoping to gain her favor. And yet, status came scrutiny. Other women envied her. Religious leaders criticized her. Men obsessed over her, sometimes dangerously. The same society that honored her as a symbol of culture reminded her again and again that she did not quite belong. But Amrapali was no passive figure. She knew her influence. She entertained ambassadors. She hosted salons. And according to legend, when King Bimbisara of Magadha tried to seize her grove by force, she negotiated with dignity. Some say they became lovers. Some say she forgave him. All agree, her mind was as captivating as her presence. And then, something changed. As years passed, Amrapali began to look beyond her role, beyond flattery, beyond finery. She began to seek peace. It was during this period that a traveling monk arrived in Vaishali, a quiet teacher, clothed in simple robes. His name was Gautama Siddhartha, the Buddha. Amrapali went to hear him speak, not in a palace, not in a salon, but in a tree. She sat with others, merchants, farmers, widows, and listened as he spoke of detachment, of suffering, of impermanence, and something within her stirred. The stories say she invited the Buddha to dine with her, that she served him herself in the shade of her grove. And after that, she made a decision that stunned the city. Amrapali renounced her title. She gave away her riches, donated her grove to the monastic order, cut her hair, took a vow, and became a nun. No longer adorned in jewels, she walked barefoot. No longer celebrated in poems of love, she recited verses of impermanence. And yet, even in this quiet life, her influence continued. She became a teacher, a writer, a wise elder. Name was recorded in the Pali Canon, a rare honor for a woman of her background. Imagine her now, aged, serene, walking through the same mango grove where she once captivated kings, but with calm in her eyes and silence in her footsteps. Her journey is not a story of shame or retreat. It is a story of transformation. It's from ornament of the city to voice of wisdom. Amrapali lived many lives in one. And through her, we glimpse the complexity of womanhood in ancient India, its contradictions, its power, and its pain. As the last blossoms fall from the mango tree in your mind, let us step into another kind of story, not one of a single woman, but of a book that has long been misunderstood. It is time to turn the delicate pages of the Kama Sutra. The Zenana. Behind the veil of Mughal pleasure chambers, the air is still. It is the cool hour of the afternoon, where golden sunlight filters through intricate yali screens, casting lace-like patterns onto polished marble floors. Fountains murmur quietly in the distance. Somewhere, a sitar hums in the hands of a court musician. You are in the zenana, the women's quarters of the Mughal palace. A world hidden from the public eye, yet alive with power, tension, beauty, and longing. The word zenana simply means women's space. But behind the term lies a labyrinth of silk-covered hallways, locked doors, rituals, and whispered rules. To the outside world, the zenana was a place of seclusion, a harem, a chamber of beauty and indulgence. It was far more complex. The Mughal emperors, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries, maintained vast palaces in cities like Agra, Delhi, and Lahore. Each zenana housed not just wives, but concubines, widowed mothers, sisters, attendants, eunuchs, poets, and even spies. At times, hundreds of women lived in these private compounds, cut off from the outer court, but never idle. Life in the zenana was carefully structured. Every woman had a title, a place, a specific duty. Some were responsible for music, others for embroidery. Some served the emperor, others advised the queen mother. Many simply waited, day after day, within embroidered walls, within rules written by others. Imagine waking here. The scent of rose water in your morning bath. Crisp and perfumed. The sounds of silk brushing past silk as women pass one another in quiet procession. But also, imagine the monotony, the repetition, the yearning for something beyond these courtyards. For many, the zenana was not a sanctuary, but a gilded prison, especially for women taken as political brides, for whom affection was never part of the arrangement. And yet, within these walls, power moved in subtle, elegant currents. Mothers of emperors often wielded immense influence. They arranged marriages, mediated court disputes, even directed diplomatic correspondence. One such figure was Nur Jahan, wife of Emperor Jahangir. Though not born of royal blood, she rose to Nairiquil power, issuing edicts in her name, appearing on coins and shaping imperial policy, all from within the zenana. Women composed poetry here. They debated, created perfumes, embroidered tales into tapestries. They passed on stories that would never appear in official chronicles. And of course, there were also intimate relationships. Some were romantic, some were strategic, some were simply human. Friendships, flirtations, rivalries, the soft click of bangles behind curtains, the scent of clove-sweetened breath shared under moonlit balconies. There were secret letters, private gardens, songs that carried double meanings. Desire here took many forms, found many veils. For those not of royal blood, life in the zenana could also offer protection. Courtesans and attendants sometimes found a degree of freedom here, free from poverty or exploitation on the outside, even if they surrendered other freedoms in return. The space was both constraining and enabling, a world of contradictions, as all hidden worlds often are. And when the emperor came to visit, there was ceremony. Perfumed rooms, carefully chosen garments, attendants whispering instructions. But once he left, the women returned to themselves, to poetry, to waiting. Two whispers shared in the hush of silk and shadow. As night fell and the palace quieted, women in the zenana often sat near the window screens watching the moon rise over the outer courtyards, dreaming of what lay beyond, of a life where doors did not lock behind them, where their voices might echo in open halls, where choice might be theirs, not lent to them. And now, as we leave this chamber behind, let us walk slowly back through time. Back through mango groves, ink-stained scrolls, and incense-wrapped corridors. Our journey has moved from temple to palace, from public dance to private dreams. And as we prepare to close our eyes for the night, there is one final whisper waiting, a reflection, a calm conclusion. Picture a dimly lit study, inlaid with sandalwood panels and cool stone floors. Scrolls are carefully stacked on low tables. Oil lamp flickers gently in the corner. The air smells faintly of ink, warm parchment, and jasmine petals brought in by the breeze. This is not a place of scandal or indulgence. It is a place of study, of reflection, of quiet exploration. Because tonight, we unfold a text that has for centuries been misread by the modern world. The Kama Sutra. When you hear its name today, you might picture something altogether different. Page after page of entangled figures, exotic postures, and whispered secrets. But this perception, this fixation on its erotic illustrations, is only a sliver of the truth. The Kama Sutra is not a sex manual. It is, in its original form, a guide to life, to relationships, to art, to ethics. To the three aims of living well in ancient Indian philosophy: Dharma, Artha, and Kama. The text was written or perhaps compiled around the 3rd century CE by Vatsyayana, a scholar living in the city of Pataliputra. He was not a hedonist. He was, in his own words, a monk. Writing in times of social decline, his Kama Sutra was not meant to titillate. It was meant to restore balance. The word kama in Sanskrit refers to much more than physical intimacy, refers to desire in all its forms: aesthetic, emotional, relational, sensory. It encompasses music, poetry, dance, elegance. And so, the Kama Sutra dedicates chapters not only to intimacy, but to fashion, conversation, courtship, the art of perfume, the games played in moonlight, the music that soothes a restless mind. It offers advice for lovers, but also for courtesans, wives, husbands, matchmakers, and entertainers. For instance, a full section is devoted to how lovers should part gracefully after a quarrel, or when passion has faded. Another discusses the different types of kisses, not as instruction, but as poetic observation, what they meant in different contexts, moods, and relationships. It is not graphic. It is reflective. And yes, there is a section on physical intimacy, classified with quiet precision, not unlike a botanical text. But even here, the tone remains measured, ritualized, respectful. The emphasis is on mutual pleasure, it's on consideration, and on the rhythm of emotion. The Kama Sutra also reflects the complex gender roles of its time. In its pages, courtesans are recognized as cultured, strategic, and self-possessed. Their inner lives are considered, their choices, tactics, and even heartbreaks are discussed with care. Women in general are addressed not just as passive recipients of attention, but as individuals with desire, discernment, and dignity. In fact, some passages are quite progressive, advising men to learn from women, to observe their needs, to respect their refusals. Of course, the text is not without its limitations. It comes from a very specific class, time, and worldview. Some ideas may feel alien today, others even troubling. It was not meant for everyone. It speaks mainly to urban elites, often excluding lower castes or married peasants entirely. But when read in its entirety, not just skimmed for spectacle, the Kama Sutra reveals something gentle and deeply human.
Oh, no.
It shows a world where pleasure was not sinful, where beauty was considered part of the good life, where emotional fulfillment was seen as a legitimate pursuit worthy of study. It is slow, it is structured, it is strangely meditative. When we strip away the layers of misinterpretation placed upon it by later eras, particularly Victorian translators obsessed with exoticism, we are left with a surprisingly calm, thoughtful, and balanced guide to the art of living. So as you lay here now, resting, listening, drifting gently, you can imagine those ancient scholars seated cross-legged, murmuring verses to one another in the soft light, speaking not only of passion, but of how to live with intention, how to listen, how to touch gently, how to part with grace. And from this world of personal refinement, we move now to a more cloistered space, a place behind carved screens, velvet drapes, and guarded doors, a world known as the Zenana, where power wore bangles, where secrets echoed softly off marbled walls, and where women waited, watched, and ruled in their own quiet ways. The courtesan is artist and intellectual. Picture a small chamber in Lucknow or Varanasi, somewhere around the 18th century. The floor is covered with cotton rugs. The ceiling hangs low, but intricately carved. On a small platform, a woman reclines, dressed not for seduction, but for song. An intimate gathering of music, verse, and conversation. She, the courtesans, its centerpiece. She is not just admired for her beauty, she is revered for her voice, her memory, her mind. Courtesans in pre-colonial India, especially the tawaifs of North India, were among the most cultured and educated women of their time. In fact, many noble families sent their sons to courtesans not for pleasure, but for refinement. Here, boys learned etiquette, classical Urdu, the proper gesture of greeting, the subtleties of ghazal poetry, and the difference between flirtation and grace. The courtesan was the teacher, the philosopher of mood and meter. In the heart of the tawaif's home, music thrived. The art of Thumri Dadra and Kathak reached new heights in these spaces. She studied under masters. She performed for nawabs. She preserved oral traditions that scholars could not record. Imagine her fingers running lightly over the strings of a tampura, her voice trailing off into the candlelit air. Each note carries generations of memory stories of love, longing, separation, and reunion. She could quote Persian poets. She knew Sanskrit aphorisms. She could improvise couplets in a crowded room and silence a debate with a single gaze. And yet she had to defend her intellect constantly, because even as she shaped the culture of an era, society often reduced her to a symbol, a temptation, a deviation. Few remembered that she preserved heritage while others chased conquest. Few acknowledged that she defined elegance while emperors fell. But history remembers in small ways. In the lilting notes of a classical recital, in the gentle sway of a dancer's hands, in the polished Urdu of a fading generation. The courtesan was not just a muse, she was the memory. Colonial shadows, the decline of courtesan culture. The year is 1858, the scent of empire hangs in the air, clove and coal smoke, parchment and powder. The Mughal throne is now little more than a formality. A different kind of power has arrived in India, British rule. At first it came through treaties and trade, but eventually it came with laws, language, and quiet condemnation. Among the many traditions reshaped by this new order was the very fabric of India's courtesan culture. The British, arriving with Victorian ideals, often misunderstood what they saw. To them, the devadasi was not a sacred performer, but an immoral figure. The tawaif was not a poet or musician, but a fallen woman. Their view was colored not by cultural understanding, but by their own discomfort with public femininity, with open sensuality, and with anything that blurred the line between womanhood and control. Imagine the city of Lucknow, once alive with music, now slowly silenced. The mehfils closed, the performers dismissed, the patrons shamed. Courtesans, once teachers of etiquette to the elite, were sidelined. Their art was no longer invited into royal courts, but pushed into private shadows. Colonial policies formalized the decline. Laws were passed to regulate and surveil courtesans. Some were reclassified as public prostitutes, regardless of their background. Entire communities were labeled as immoral, and their artistic roles were erased from state records. Missionary reformers arrived with purity campaigns, demanding that temple dancing be banned. And so, one by one, the temples fell silent. No more Bharatanatyam beneath sacred towers. No more morning offerings in the form of dance. Only closed doors. And a growing stigma. This was not just the loss of profession, it was the loss of legacy. System of oral learning, lineage, and performance centuries in the making was abruptly disbanded, and in its place, silence, shame, misunderstanding. Many courtesans were forced into marriage, others vanished into poverty. Some rebranded themselves as actresses when film and theater emerged. A few found ways to preserve their traditions underground, passing music and movement from mother to daughter in whispered rooms. But for most, the world no longer saw them. Or if it did, it saw only the label, not the story. Yet traces remain. In the haunting melodies of old records. In Kathak performances that still echo the grace of Lucknow's salons. In temple carvings where dancers still spin forever in stone. And in recent decades, a soft, respectful revival has begun. Scholars and artists, often women, have reclaimed these histories, rereading them not as tales of scandal, but as narratives of power, survival, and extraordinary skill. They remind us that to dance before a god is no small thing, that to master art in a world that denies your place is a quiet rebellion, and that when the world forgets women like these, it forgets its own rhythm. And so, as you lie here now, perhaps with your thoughts gently fading, you can imagine this closing scene. A quiet methile, a soft tabla beat, a woman's voice rising in an old dialect, No audience, no applause, just memory and grace, and the long, slow rhythm of something not quite gone. From here, we return now to our final reflection, a gentle closing to this journey. Mirror rooms and hidden scripts. Feminine spaces of resistance. You are standing before a small, arched doorway, carved with vines and flowers barely wide enough for two to pass. A curtain flutters in the breeze. On the other side is not a throne room, nor a battlefield, but something more intimate. A Zenana library, a chamber of soft cushions, scroll-lined walls, and quiet revolution. You see, not all resistance wears armor. Sometimes it wears silk. Sometimes it reads in silence. And sometimes it simply remembers what others forget. Across India's many palaces and temple precincts, tucked behind latticed windows and mirrored walls, women created spaces of their own, not just to rest or adorn, but to read, to write, to dream. In Rajasthan, Sheesh Mahals, rooms covered in 1,000 mirrored tiles, were not only places of luxury, but sanctuaries of female solitude. At night, a single oil lamp could set the ceiling ablaze with reflection. It was said the queens and courtesans would lie there, watching the stars multiplied above them, dreaming of worlds beyond the walls. In the south, temple dancers etched mantras and private verses into the margins of prayer books, a hidden language of devotion and identity that priests rarely noticed. In Mughal harems, Persian poetry was passed hand to hand, coded with metaphors written by women for women. Some verses spoke of spiritual longings, others of bodily desire. Still others of confinement, likened to birds in golden cages. And throughout these spaces, mirrors played a curious role, not just for reflection, but for awareness, to watch, to observe, to remind the women within that, even in constraint, they could still see themselves. Sometimes rebellion was subtle, a glance held too long, a love poem smuggled in embroidery, a refusal to marry, disguised as spiritual calling. These acts may seem small, but history is made of such threads. Even when denied the pen, women created scripts, through their songs, their dance, their scent compositions, their needlework, their glances across partition screens. And so, even when the outside world forgot them, they did not forget themselves. As you lie here safe and still, think of them. These architects of silence and resistance. Their lives were often hidden, but never hollow, because resistance, too, can be soft. A story whispered after dark, a step taken slightly out of rhythm, a mirror that doesn't just reflect, but remembers. And now, with this final chamber behind us, let us return to the quiet temple steps, the soft perfume of the past, and gently close our eyes with gratitude for all that was shared. Beyond the binary gender fluidity and sacred and sensual spaces, close your eyes and imagine a lamplit courtyard at twilight. A performer steps into the center, not a man, not a woman, but someone in between. Their gestures are graceful. Their voice shifts seamlessly between tones. The audience is captivated, quiet. This is not fiction. This is part of South Asian history, a space where gender fluidity, for a time, was not just accepted, but ritualized, honored, even divine. In both sacred and sensual spheres of Indian society, certain individuals who did not conform to strict gender roles found places of visibility and power, especially within the world of courtesanship and temple life. Among the most notable are the Hydras, a diverse community historically recognized as a third gender in India. Today, they are often misunderstood or marginalized, but in ancient and medieval periods, Hydras held sacred roles. They served in temples, sang blessings at births and weddings, and lived in tightly bonded matriarchal communities. Some were eunuchs, others intersex, many transgender. Their existence challenged simple categories, when within royal courts, especially during the Mughal era, eunuchs and gender non-conforming attendants played crucial political roles. They guarded the zenana. They served as diplomats, advisors, treasurers. Why? Because they moved between spaces. They were trusted not to act as rivals to the emperor, yet often more educated and tactful than male courtiers. Their identities were complex, but their presence was acknowledged, even valued. Not in every time, not in every place. but enough that history remembers. In the world of performance, dance, music, poetry, gender often became fluid by necessity. Some male performers trained in the female style. Some female performers adopted masculine personas. The goal was not always to pass or disguise, but to embody mood, energy, rasa, a deep emotional essence. Imagine a performance of Bharatanatyam, where the dancer becomes both the lover and the beloved. Or a ghazal singer, shifting from male to female pronouns in a single verse, not for confusion, but for universality. In some traditions, like Yakshagana and Kathakali, men performed all roles, including those of divine women, not as mockery, but as a kind of reverence. And in others, female performers invoked masculine power through posture and gaze, subverting expectations while honoring ancient archetypes. This world was not utopian. There was judgment, there were exclusions, there was violence too. But there were also pockets of freedom, where identity was more about spirit than structure, more about performance than permanence. Today, as global conversations around gender continue to evolve, it's important to remember that many of these ideas are not new. Fluidity, duality, multiplicity. These were not foreign to ancient India. They were present in stories of gods and dancers, in shrines and salons, in whispers and in song. And so, as we rest now at the end of this long, gentle journey, you may find yourself holding a fuller picture, a world not only of beauty and silence, but of complexity, shifting identities, people who lived between lines and gave those lines their color. Perfume, ornament, and erotic aesthetics in courtesan culture. Imagine a wooden box carefully opened in the early morning light. Inside are tiny bottles of oil, bundles of saffron thread, crushed petals, and powdered ambergris. A tray beside it holds bangles of jade and gold, strings of pearls, and tiny silver toe rings cooled by the night. This is not a dressing ritual of vanity. It is a daily act of art. In the world of the tawaif and devadasi, the art of beauty was not superficial. It was a discipline, a language, a kind of erotic aesthetic philosophy, deeply tied to the concept of kama-sensual fulfillment, beauty, harmony. Perfume was the first note in this sensory symphony. Adders or fragrant oils were blended with care. Each one told a story: jasmine for confidence, sandalwood for calm and dignity, musk for intimacy and slow unfolding. These scents lingered on veils, behind ears, along anklets. They were not sprayed, but dabbed, layered, worn like mood itself. Next came adornment, not simply jewelry, but symbolic placement. A black dot behind the ear to ward off envy. A small silver bell at the waist to announce one's presence without speech. Gold bangles to echo rhythm during dance. Red alta painted onto feet to enhance movement and signify auspiciousness. Even makeup was symbolic. Kohl wasn't only for alert, cooled the eyes and protected against the sun. Henna told of seasons and social occasions. Signor, for married women, spoke of union, but was also blended into rituals. These practices were part of a larger aesthetic known as ragar, the mood of romantic, graceful beauty in Indian classical arts. To the courtesan, beauty was not about seduction, it was about evocation, to evoke longing, to reflect the divine through the body, to harmonize with the music of the evening. Everything had a purpose. A finger ring to draw attention to a mudra, a translucent fabric to shimmer under the lamplight, a nose ring to frame the slow turn of the face during a verse. When she entered a room, she was not simply seen, she was read like poetry in motion. And this is why the aesthetics of the tawaif endured, because they were not merely for pleasure, but for meaning. They translated emotion into motion, scent, color, and light. Now, though today these rituals have become stylized, commercialized, or forgotten, their essence remains in the gestures of a dancer, in the quiet ritual of getting ready, in the way we still use beauty to tell stories without words. Now let us walk slowly from the scent-soaked verandas of this segment to a different place entirely, to a courtroom, to a woman who broke with everything expected of her devotion, obedience, and shamed instead demanded to be seen on her own terms. Kaharyan, the first Indian voice ever recorded the year is 1902. The air is warm, thick with humidity, and still. You're inside a quiet room in Calcutta, one not built for an audience, but for a machine. In the center stands a strange brass contraption. The phonograph recorder, it hums faintly. No crowd stirs, no music plays just yet. A woman steps forward. She adjusts her silk scarf with practiced grace. Her bangles do not jingle. Her eyes scan the machine as if facing a new kind of audience. Then she takes a breath, begins to sing. Her name is Gauhar Yan. In that precise moment, her voice becomes the first Indian voice ever captured on a gramophone record. History, until then, passed by breath and memory, now passes into wax. Gauhar was not born into this world of fame. She entered it through hardship, movement, and reinvention. Born as Angelina Yeaward in 1873, to an Armenian-British father and an Indian mother, her early life was shaped by separation. After her parents divorced, her mother converted to Islam and entered the world of tawaifs, elite courtesans of North India. They moved to Benares and later to Calcutta, where culture bloomed beside colonial anxiety. There, young Gauhar trained in Kathak dance, Hindustani classical vocals, and Persian and Urdu poetry. Her voice became a map of influences east and west, sacred and sensual, private and public. By her teenage years, she was already a sensation. Audiences came not only for her voice, but for her command of thumri, her poise, and her unmistakable charisma. She was bold. She hosted salons. She owned property. She published poetry. She lived unapologetically in the public eye. When Fred Geisberg, an engineer from the Gramophone Company of London, arrived in India searching for recordable voices, Gauhar was among the first to agree. Most artists hesitated, but Gauhar saw the future, and she knew her name belonged in it. Recording was not easy. The early gramophone offered no editing, no retakes, and only 3 minutes of recording time. Singers had to stand close to the brass horn and project directly into its entirely new performance form. Still, she performed effortlessly. At the end of each track, Gauhar would announce, in English and in a clear, proud voice, "My name is Gauhar Yan." This wasn't vanity. It was a cataloging requirement. But over time, it became something more an assertion of authorship. A woman claiming her place in an era of men and machines. She went on to record over 600 songs in more than 10 languages. Her music was sold across India. Her voice played in homes, salons, tea shops, and railway cars. She became a household name. And yet, the social stigma of being a courtesan lingered. Colonial society admired her from a distance, but would not embrace her. Over time, public taste changed. The salons quieted. Gauhar aged, her wealth faded. She moved from city to city, eventually to Mysore, where she was given modest patronage but little recognition. She died there in 1930, alone with fewer listeners than she once commanded. But her voice never truly vanished. It had been captured, etched into shellac discs, carried through generations. In recent years, her recordings have resurfaced, crackling and faded, but still hauntingly beautiful. Her artistry has been reclaimed, her boldness admired anew. Gauhar Yan was more than a singer. She was a bridge between the past and the future, between mehfils and machines, between a disappearing world and an emerging one. Tonight, perhaps as you listen in stillness, you can hear it, that faint echo of her voice floating through time. A sound that once broke silence, and still does. Conclusion: a whisper from the past. The moon has risen over ancient rooftops. The dancers have laid down their bells. The courtesans have folded away their silks. The temple lamps flicker softly, and the palace windows fall silent. Night, you've wandered through a world long faded but never entirely gone. A world shaped by art and restriction, by grace and burden, by desire and duty. You began in the stone corridors of temple compounds, where little girls grew into women trained to please gods and patrons. Their days were precise, ritualized, exhausting, filled with music, but rarely with choice. Then, you stepped into the footsteps of Amrapalia, a woman of such charm and intelligence that cities adored her and kings feared her. And yet, it was not glory she sought in the end, but peace. The rustling of mango leaves, the the gentle path of renunciation. You turned the pages of the Kama Sutra and saw not scandal, but subtlety, a careful study of living with intention, of how pleasure, when understood, is a kind of wisdom, a kind of balance, a kind of calm. And finally, you passed through the veiled archways of the Zenana Palace behind a palace, a hidden world where women ruled with silence, with story, with strategy, where rebellion was slow and beauty was both armor and illusion. Each space you visited tonight, whether sacred or sensual, lonely or luminous, was shaped by a quiet truth. History is not only told in battles and borders, it is told in the soft click of anklets, in the careful folding of fabric, in the poems no man ever read. These women, so often overlooked, so often misunderstood, were not simply performers or lovers. They were artists, archivists, strategists, storytellers. They lived in the shadows of temples and thrones, but their presence still echoes today. In music, in language, in the silence that follows an old song. And now, dear listener, as the past recedes and the present wraps around you like a gentle shawl, you may feel yourself drifting down marble corridors, past blooming groves, over pages of quiet wisdom. There is no need to remember every name, no need to hold on to every image. Just let the rhythms of history rock you softly into rest, because even in the quietest corners of time, there are stories and they are waiting, just like this, to be heard. Good night. Sleep well.